most of the evidence to disprove this was literally found in his own video, in her own video, where she has not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 quotes discussing and mentioning how controversial this conspiracy theory is. Lauren Southern is a conservative, to say the least, political commentator who has quite a controversial history, in particular in regards to the Great Replacement conspiracy theory. In this video, I'm going to be going over some of her recent claims about the conspiracy theory and her advocacy of it, and fact-checking them. So before we begin, let's start with a definition of the Great Replacement as a conspiracy theory. This is given from Wikipedia, and I quote, "It states that, with the complicity or cooperation of replacist elites, the ethnic French population, as well as white European populations at large, is being demographically and culturally replaced with non-European peoples, specifically Arab, Berber, Turkish, and sub-Saharan Muslim populations, through mass migration, demographic growth, and a European drop in the birth rates." So now that we have that definition set down, let's talk about 2 specific statements that Lauren Southern made on a debate panel a few days ago or a week ago. So the first statement happens at 10 minutes and 10 seconds into this video. Answer the question, panelists confront Lauren Southern on Destiny's YouTube channel. So we'll go to that first and foremost. So here is the first statement.
My side of the base, we're talking about.
Okay. I think Lauren's a good idea.
Wait, Mr. Girl, let her talk. Let her talk, Mr. Girl.
In 2015. Yeah, I want to. Who on the right? We're talking about the Great Replacement in early 2016, 2015. Who? You said I latched onto it because it was some big right-wing thing that I just decided to jump onto.
So Richard didn't exist. So the first thing is the implication that this was some niche thing that nobody talked about in 2015, 2016. This is not something that she just latched onto. This is just some obscure thing that she found somewhere. Second quote is at 11:10, and I'm going to be playing this for you guys as well.
And Lauren, please answer the question that he asked.
No, I didn't hear anyone talk about the Great Replacement when I spoke about it. I found it from an obscure French author named Renaud Camus. It was certainly not being discussed in right-wing circles, and it wasn't controversial at the time because it was just this obscure socially left-leaning author that had made this theory that I found and decided to make it the title of my video. It hadn't gotten the notoriety it has today because it wasn't in that Shooter's Manifesto yet.
So then we have quote number 2. So now we have 2 quotes that we're going to work with for the remainder of this video, okay? Quote number 1. Who on the right were talking about the Great Replacement in 2015, 2016? You said I latched onto it because it was some big right-wing thing that I decided to jump onto. Quote number 2. The Great Replacement was incredibly obscure. I didn't hear anyone talk about the Great Replacement when I spoke about it. I found it from an obscure French author named Renaud Camus, and it certainly was not being discussed in right-wing circles, and it wasn't controversial at the time. Here we go. Okay, so first of all, I would externally fact-check this and check with other resources. Fortunately for me, Lauren Southern's own video on the Great Replacement, which is simply privated but can still be found, perfectly debunks the majority of her statements here. So, quoting from Lauren Southern's video titled The Great Replacement, opening up the video at timestamp 000, she says the following, which contradicts her saying that it wasn't controversial at the time. And I quote, "Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about a very serious subject. Something that I think a lot of people are too afraid to talk about because they're worried about being called a bigot, both by people on the left and the right, surprisingly. So this is something that's not controversial, yet you will be called a bigot by both the left and the right for talking about it." Quote number 2 at 1:18. "Is there any evidence that a great white replacement is actually occurring, or is Camus just another instance of paranoid white panic? Is he just another racist xenophobe who deserves to be convicted of a hate crime? Not controversial, but Camus, for talking about this, might be another racist xenophobe who deserves to be committed by a hate crime." Quote number 3 from her own video at 1 minute 35 seconds. "Unfortunately, much of the research on these issues is withheld from the public by the European governments. Not controversial, but the government is censoring information about this. Quote number 4 from timestamp 222. People are very, very uncomfortable talking about this subject, which is why YouTubers like myself who can't get fired from their jobs have to do it. Not controversial, but if you talk about this, you can get fired from your job. Quote number 5 at 10:45 in her own video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters who make it so I'm able to talk about these scary, bigoted subjects without fear of being fired. I really do appreciate it. Once again, not controversial. However, you're going to get fired for doing this, and the only reason why, you know, Lauren Southern can do it is because of her Patreon supporters, and that's why she can talk about these scary, bigoted subjects. So, I think that's plenty enough for the controversial points, but there's more, don't worry. Then on the point about the Great Replacement being incredibly obscure, and she didn't hear anyone else talk about the Great Replacement when I spoke about it, there's even one quote for this as well in her own video. At timestamp 1:05, she says, though Camus has had his eyes set specifically on France, his concerns have been shared by many nationalist and identitarian movements across all of Europe. Wow, it's an obscure theory, an obscure observation, yet it's being shared by, you know, nationalist and identitarian movements all across the European continent. That's pretty nuts. But yeah, so apart from the parts of her own video that discredit her own statements, which, I don't know, I guess she maybe forgot about her own video or expects nobody to check, I can answer a lot of her questions. So she asked, who on the right were talking about the Great Replacement in 2015 to 2016? Allow me to answer that question for you. Now, for some following parts, I want to thank user Brandon Goldberg from the Destiny subreddit for making a post about this that helped with some aspects of the research for this video. So here we go. In a speech by white supremacist Jared Taylor in 2015 Budapest in Hungary, Jared Taylor says the following, 2014. The conviction that Europe is in a life or death struggle. Europe can't remain Europe without Europeans. When we're being replaced by non-Europeans, it threatens our core way of life, Taylor said. This can be found in a Slate article titled Jared Taylor, the article's titled White Flight, America's white supremacists are ignored at home, so they're looking to start over with a little help from Europe's far right. Jared Taylor is undeniably a white supremacist. There is ADL and SPLC profiles on him where they detail his white supremacist connections and beliefs. Furthermore, there are also 2 articles published in the white supremacist publication American Renaissance, which is ran by Jared Taylor. One in 2015. This article is titled The Great Replacement. 2015 article in one of the larger, you know, white supremacist publications that literally talk about the theory in 2015. Wow, that's crazy. You know what's even crazier? It's not just one article. It's 2 articles in 2015 still about the exact same thing. White genocide, Great Replacement, these types of conspiracy theories. So we have some examples right away of people talking about this, you know, in 2015, 2016, one even from 2014, interestingly enough. But is that all? Is it just some obscure right-wing publications, which, let's be honest, Lauren Southern probably knew about? No, it's not. This is a big thing. This isn't some obscure theory. But to read some of the following excerpts from the Wikipedia page on the Great Replacement. In 2011, Marine Le Pen evoked the theory, claiming that France's adversaries were waging a moral and economic war on the country, apparently to deliver it to submersion by an organized replacement of our population. In 2013, historian Dominique Venner's suicide in Notre Dame de Paris, in which he left a note outlining the crime of the replacement of our people, is reported to have inspired the far-right Iliad Institute's main ideological tenet of the Great Replacement. Referring to the conspiracy theory, Marie Le Pen publicly praised Venner, claiming that his last gesture, eminently political, was to try to awaken the French people. In 2015, Gilliam Fay gave a speech at the Swedish Army Academy in Stockholm, in which he claimed that there was 3 societal things being used against Europeans to carry out a supposed Great Replacement: abortion, homosexuality, and immigration. He asserted that Muslims were replacing white people by using birth rates as a demographic weapon. In 2016, Alternative for Germany, which is the German far-right party, deputy leader Beatrix von Storch used a language reminiscent of the theory when she claimed that plans for a mass exchange of populations had long been made. Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini has repeatedly adopted the theme of the Great Replacement. In May 2016, 2 years before his election to office, he claimed ethnic replacement is underway. In Italy, in an interview with Sky TG24, accusing nameless, well-funded organizations for importing workers that he named farm slaves. He stated that there was a lucrative attempt at genocide of Italians. In 2015, writing on the publishing website Gen Stil, scholar of Islam Hans Jensen used Great Replacement rhetoric, suggested that it was an undisputed fact that among the European Union's governing elite, there was a common consensus that Europeans were no good and can better be replaced. In May 2015, Martin Bosman, a Dutch parliament representative for the Party of Freedom, released his book Minority in Their Own Land. Invoking the conspiracy theory, Bosma wrote about a growing new population of immigrants which lent itself onto the apparently post-racial multicultural state of salvation. So, I don't know what type of obscure theory that's being, number one, mentioned in speeches by white supremacists, being talked about in white supremacist publications, and being talked about by mainstream politicians, and in some cases, even elected representatives. This is not an obscure theory. This is a staple. This is something that has been part and parcel of a white supremacist conservative agenda for a while. Her statements that this is some obscure thing that she found and started talking about, and that, you know, nobody was talking about this in 2015, 2016, is not true whatsoever. And the fact that it's not controversial is even more laughable, given everything we know, and given the statement that she makes in her own video. But that's not it. So right now I've given some examples specifically, 2015, 2016, some examples ranging 2011, 2016. But we can take an even deeper dive into how, you know, widespread and how often this trend and this idea of the Great Replacement and its tenets have been present in far-right white supremacist circles. So I'm reading from the Great Replacement page on Wikipedia. Renaud Camus cites two influential figures in the epilogue of his 2011 book, The Great Replacement. British politician Enoch Powell's apocalyptic vision of future race relations expressed in his 1968 Rivers of Blood speech, and French author Jean Raspail's depiction of the collapse of the West from an overwhelming tidal wave of third world immigration, featured in his 1973 novel, The Camp of Saints. Despite its own singularities and concepts, the Great Replacement is encompassed in a larger and older white genocide conspiracy theory, popularized in the US by neo-Nazi David Lane in his 1995 White Genocide Manifesto, where he asserted that governments in Western countries were intending to turn white people into extinct species. The idea of a replacement of indigenous white people under the guidance of a hostile elite can be further traced back to pre-World War II anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, which posited the existence of a Jewish plot to destroy Europe through miscegenation, especially in Edouard Drumont's anti-Semitic bestseller La France Juive in 1886. Commenting on this resemblance, historian Nicolas Leborg and political scientist Jean-Yves Camus suggest that Camus' contribution was to replace the anti-Semitic elements with a clash of civilizations between Muslims and Europeans. Maurice Barré's nationalist writings of that period have also been noted in the ideological genealogy of the Great Replacement. Barré's contending both in 1889 and in the 1900 that a replacement of the native population under the combined effect of immigration and a decline in the birth rate was happening in France. Scholars also highlight a modern similarity to European neo-fascist and neo-Nazi thinkers from the immediate post-war, especially Maurice Bardèche, René Binet, and Gaston Armand Amadous. My bad. The associated and more recent conspiracy of Eurabia, published by British author Badoyer in her 2005 eponymous book, is often cited as a probable inspiration for Camus' Great Replacement. Eurabia theory likewise involves globalist entities, that time led both French and Arab powers conspiring to Islamize Europe, and Muslims submerging the continent through immigration and higher birth rates. The conspiracy theory also depicts immigration as invaders, or as a fifth column, invited to the continent by a corrupt political elite. Scholars generally agree that, although he did not further the name, Camus indeed coined the term the Great Replacement as a slogan and concept, and eventually led to its fame in the 2010s. Also worth noting that Eurabia as a conspiracy theory was something that was explicitly written in Anders Breivik's manifesto following the actions that he took, the terrorist actions. So yeah, let's talk about this for a minute, okay? Let's go over the quotes from the very beginning and figure out what we've established. So, who on the right were talking about the Great Replacement in 2015 to 2016? You said I latched onto it because it was some big right-wing thing that I decided to jump onto. So, number one, there were plenty of people talking about the Great Replacement in 2015 and 2016. In fact, there have been people talking about this type of conspiracy theory and variations of it for literal centuries. That's how much of a part and parcel this way of thinking is to white supremacist, ultra-nationalist, and conservative groups. It's not something new. It's not something obscure that Lauren Southern just stumbled upon that nobody else was talking about in 2015, 2016, or before then. Quote number 2. The Great Replacement was so incredibly obscure, I didn't hear anyone talk about the Great Replacement when I spoke out about it. I found it from an obscure French author named Renaud Camus, and it was certainly not being discussed in right-wing circles, and it wasn't controversial at the time. Most of the evidence to disprove this was literally found in his own video, in her own video, where she has not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 quotes discussing and mentioning how controversial this conspiracy theory is and how much of a brave person she is for speaking up about it. So once again, she's trying to rewrite her narrative about her relation to the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, as well as the history about the Great Replacement conspiracy as a whole. Don't let her do this. Don't let her lie about the Great Replacement. Hold her to account for what was done there. But also, most notably, because she's trying to rewrite the narrative, she's trying to cover for herself, and at the same time diminish the harms, the controversy, and the existence of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory throughout both modern contemporary history and throughout more, you know, long-term history, so to say. But yeah, don't let Lauren Southern run away. Don't let her lie about the Great Replacement. Thank you.